What is up, YouTubers? So today I'm going to show you how to make this wooden blue crab. This is a Maryland blue crab. I guess they haven't done South Carolina, Florida, all over the place. But anyway, you can use these wooden crabs for Christmas ornaments or just have them sitting around as decorations. To do this project, you're going to need a dark piece of hardwood, a 1/2 inch thick, and one light piece of hardwood, a 1/4 inch thick. The size of these boards, length and width, will be determined by whatever size crab you choose to make. I found a local hardware flooring contractor around me that was willing to sell me some of their hardwood scraps of all different type sizes and colors that I could use for my scroll saw projects. As far as tools are concerned, you're going to need a scroll saw with a fine-tooth blade, a Dremel tool with various sanding drums, some medium viscosity super glue or wood glue, adhesive spray, acrylic clear coat spray, a 3-inch piece of stainless steel wire for the stand. We'll get into that later. And an X-Acto knife with nice sharp blades on it. You're also going to need some 3M painter's tape. Some optional tools that I use for this project, but you really don't need, would be a belt sander and a bandsaw. Both of these things can be cheap Harbor Freight tools. So I found a free picture of a crab on the internet and printed it out to the size I wanted. You got to print 2 pictures of each crab for the pattern, as you're going to need to cut the legs off of one of them to use for the top shell. So, you don't have legs on both of them, and I'll show you later on. So anyway, for this project, I'm going to use the 1/4 inch thick light colored material for the base of the crab, the legs and the claws, and the 1/2 inch thick dark colored wood for the top shell. You can switch off or do whatever you want with the colors of the wood. That's just my preference. My flooring contractor didn't have any 1/2 inch dark colored scraps, so I laminated 2 1/4 inch thick pieces together and I let them dry overnight. So after printing out the crab pattern, I cut around the crab picture that I printed and laid it out on a 1/4 inch wood sheet, enough to fit 3 crabs on it. You could do 4 or 5, whatever size sheet you have, but I just laid them out there and marked it so I knew that I could fit these crabs on this sheet with not too much scrap left over. After I was sure I could fit all 3 crabs on the sheet, I covered the wood sheet with 3M painter's tape. And after you apply the tape to the entire board, I sprayed on a coat of spray adhesive to the tape covered board. If I'd not put the tape on the board and the sprayed adhesive directly on the wood, I would have had to use some solvent to remove the pattern and the sticky adhesive from the board. So this makes it much easier to remove all that stuff from your wood. Plus, the tape helps lubricate the scroll saw blade. After the board was sprayed, I continued to spray the reverse side of the crab templates as well and set them aside to get tacky. After the adhesive had set for a minute or 2, I carefully placed the printed paper crab templates on the 1/4 inch wood sheet, making sure that there are no bubbles underneath the paper templates. Place the templates as close to the size of the wood as you can to allow all the templates to fit properly. So here I use a roller to ensure that the paper templates are completely applied to the painter's tape on the wood sheet. Set the planks aside to dry for a while. They don't take too long to set up. You could probably cut them right away, but that's what we're going to do. I previously applied the top shell pattern to the 1/2 inch top piece that I had laminated together previously and glued the pattern to the tape board. It has already had time to dry, so I can proceed to cut it out and with the scroll saw. I'm using a Delta scroll saw with a number 9 11 tooth per inch double tooth saw blade at half speed on the saw. It cuts through this 1/2 inch stock pretty easily without burning the wood. Also remember, do not force the wood through the saw blade. This will lead to broken saw blades and burnt wood. Take your time and ease the wood into the saw as it takes it. Don't force it. Remove any cut off pieces as you go so they're not in your way. You'll cut halfway through the crab or maybe around a leg or two and you'll have some scrap. Just pull that out of the way and so you don't have that fouling the saw or pinching your fingers. So after the top shell's been cut off, you'll need to shape it a bit. This will save time sanding with the Dremel tool later on. To do this, I draw a line on both sides of the top shell, from the shell tip to the mid area on the shell, the top of the shell. It doesn't have to be perfect, as we'll be trimming some of this away on the belt sander later on. So rough cut both sides of the top shell on the scroll saw along the line you just drew. And after it's been cut, remove all the painter's tape from the piece. You can now trim the piece on the belt sander just roughly, and remember, we will do all the final sanding with the Dremel later on. So now we can return to the crab legs, or the base of the crab. The glue has been set up by now and is ready to cut, but first we need to separate the templates from the board, essentially just cutting them into smaller sections to make it easier to handle on the scroll saw. I usually cut mine apart on my bandsaw, but you can do it on the scroll saw or chop saw or anything you like. So cutting the legs and the body of the crab is far more difficult than the top shell. So you might want to practice on a piece of 1/4-inch hardwood scrap before attempting the body legs section. And remember not to force the piece through the saw. Take your time. The legs of the crab body are very thin after cutting them, and even though you're using hardwoods, they can snap easily if you push on them too hard. Also, while you're cutting, it's a good idea to remove some of the sections that you already have cut through so that they're not in your way and they won't pinch your fingers and they won't snap any of these legs off as you go. The saw in the video here looks like it's moving a lot slower than it really is. It's something to do with the 60 cycle flash of the lights or something like that. But the saw is actually moving up and down a lot faster than what you see. At this point, I stopped the saw to show you the section right here where the crab shell goes over top of it. The bottom of it is really not important that you follow this line right here. You might want to cut it a little short on the front there and the back so that the shell on top hangs over just a little bit. Right here I stopped the saw to remove one of those pieces I was talking about earlier so it doesn't jam the saw or anything, and continue on with the cut. Okay, so you guys get the idea. We're going to stop this and move on. So after the pieces have been cut, you can remove all the painter's tape And now we're getting ready for the Dremel process. I use a variety of Dremel drum sanding cylinders of all different sizes and diameters, grits and things. I usually start with a small drum, but I change them out depending on the size of the space I need to get into. Before you start, remember to wear some breathing protection, as there'll be a lot of airborne dust while you grind this wood away. So you can start sanding the outside of the edges and then move back to the flippers. Now remember, the flippers are flatter and thinner than anything else on the crab, so I like to give them a good sanding to reduce their thickness to around half or 1/8 of an inch thick or so. After that, carefully start sanding the legs and the claws. You might have to use one of the really small metal grinding bits to finish up the small stuff. Now you can inspect the entire crab, top shell and body, to make sure that everything looks good. Then place the top shell on the body and check for a good fit. The crab shell top should match the bottom pretty good. You don't want any of the bottom leg section hanging over. So at this point, sand anything that needs it. Then blow the crab off with compressed air and glue the top shell to the bottom using either wood glue or super glue. I use super glue because it sets up a lot faster. Now that everything has been cleaned and the two pieces have been glued together and are dry, it's time to paint it with clear coat. You can, of course, paint it with any color you like. However, I prefer to clear coat it because it brings out the wood grain. As a side note, you might want to install the stand of the crab base before coating as well. It'll make it easier to move the crab around while spraying it. I use a 1/16 inch diameter stainless steel welding wire for my stand, and it seems to hold up pretty well. You just cut it as long as you need it for the angle you want the crab to stand up to, and then drill yourself your 16th inch hole and glue the wire to it, and wait for it to dry, of course, before you start painting it. Now for coating, I tried a UV resin on the thing, but it took forever to dry for some reason. Usually it doesn't do that. So I decided to go with an acid brush here to apply the resin to the crab, and I spread it all over. This is where you get a nice thick coat going, and it goes between the crab claws, and it really makes a mess. You can't really hardly grind it out of there without possibly breaking one of the claws off. So we continue to paint all around the top and the sides of the crab, and it's starting to look pretty nice, actually. It's really high gloss. It's thick. It does a real good job of coating up any imperfections you had in the wood. But here's the drips that I was talking about earlier. You can see them showing up there, and they're running down the side of the crab. And later on, you have to put that thing down like I have here. Oh, no, boy, that's great. So now the top is stuck to the card, and it's a real mess. So this whole thing with the UV light really didn't work. Or the UV gel, I even tried an additional flashlight, UV flashlight, to try to promote the drying of the UV resin or epoxy, whatever you want to call it, with no luck. It just didn't seem like it was setting up. So I decided I'd just leave the UV light on overnight and go to bed. And the next day it was still a little tacky. Okay, so the next morning we looked at it, and everything looked like it was nice and hard. However, we did have a lot of drips and fill-in spots from the thick epoxy or UV resin. So I ground them all off with a fine Dremel tool and got everything looking pretty good, and then sprayed it with several coats of the crystal clear acrylic spray. So if you've done everything correctly and followed my instructions, you should have something that looks like this. It's a pretty nice little ornament. You can hang it on a tree if you don't put the stand on it, or just sit it around like I said early in the beginning of the video. There are some little sprigs of holly and with berries on there that I purchased to put in the claws, or you can have them hold anything you want if you wanted to go that route. So anyway, it's been nice making this crab. I've made several of them. Everybody seems to like them. They make great Christmas presents and stuff like that. So I had a good time doing the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe and like. Thank you. Bye.